Before we begin, I want to share a brief sensitivity notice. Today's video is an unfiltered look at my personal journey, and it includes honest discussions about family trauma, childhood instability, and mental health struggles. I am sharing these experiences for documentary and awareness purposes. I am not a mental health professional, and this content is not a substitute for medical advice. If you are currently in a vulnerable place, please prioritize your well-being and consider if now is the right time for you to watch. If you or someone you know in the Philippines needs support, please reach out to the National Center for Mental Health Crisis Hotline at 1553. You are not alone. This is a space for honest documentation and community support. Let's begin. Let me start with something simple. This channel is called Jana Unfiltered. And if you're going to understand why I named it that, then you need to understand who Jana is. Not the version that shows up put together and functional. The real version. The one that nobody really saw growing up. The one that learned very early that being invisible was safer than being noticed. This video is my introduction. My real one. And I am going to be honest with you in a way that might make some people uncomfortable. That is fine. This channel was never made for comfort. It was made for truth. I want to talk about what it is like to grow up invisible. And I mean that in the most literal way possible. Not invisible in a poetic sense. Invisible in the sense that you are physically present in a household, in a classroom, in a family, and yet nobody is actually seeing you. Nobody is checking if you are okay. Nobody is asking what you need. You are just there, existing, taking up space, getting through the day. And that becomes normal so quickly that you stop expecting anything different. I am the firstborn child in my family. My father was an alcoholic and, when he was younger, also a drug user. He passed away in 2012 from a heart attack at 48 years old. My mother has narcissistic traits, and if you are not familiar with that term, what it means in practice is that she is never wrong. Every mistake, every problem, every bad outcome in the household was always someone else's fault, usually my father's. And when he was gone, it became mine. But I will get to that part. Because my parents were dealing with their own chaos, the fighting, the alcohol, the financial stress, there was very little left over for the children. I was the oldest, which meant I was also the one most expected to just handle things. Younger siblings needed attention. Parents needed to work. And somewhere in all of that, the oldest child just had to manage. If you grew up as the eldest in a struggling household, you already know exactly what I mean. You become small so that everyone else has enough room. Now here is something that people do not always realize about unstable households. They move a lot. And every time you move, a child loses something. In the Philippines, elementary school covers 6 grades. That is 6 years in one school for most children. I attended 4 different elementary schools. 4. And high school is 4 years. I attended 3 different high schools. Think about what that does to a child. Every time you start to settle, every time you begin to recognize faces and learn names and feel even a little bit like you belong somewhere, it gets taken away. You pack up and start over. New school, new classmates, new teachers who do not know your name yet. And you do this over and over again, while going home to a household that feels nothing like a safe place. Building friendships in that situation is nearly impossible. Not because you do not want them, but because experience teaches you quickly that connections do not last. Why invest in a friendship when you might be gone in a few months? Why let someone get close when close always seems to lead to loss? That kind of thinking starts in childhood, and it does not just disappear when you grow up. It stays with you. It shapes how you relate to people for years, sometimes for the rest of your life. Despite all of this, and I want to be clear about this because I think it matters, I was still a student who performed well. I was a top student in certain grades. Not consistently, because consistency is nearly impossible when your environment is in constant chaos and your family is financially struggling and your emotional state is being pulled in 10 directions at once. But I held on academically when I could. I earned awards. I showed up, and I did the work even when everything around me was falling apart. I say this not to brag, but because I think it is important to name it. Being capable and being in tremendous pain can exist at the same time. Doing well in school did not mean I was okay. It meant I was coping the only way I knew how. My elementary graduation is something I still think about. My parents did not attend. I walked into that ceremony alone. I was crying. And a mother, a stranger, someone I had never met, the mother of another student, saw me and walked alongside me so I would not have to march alone. I do not know her name. I never learned it, but I remember her. And the fact that a stranger showed me more kindness in that moment than my own family did tells you a lot about what my childhood looked like on the inside. High school was darker. Much darker. By the time I was in my first year of high school, the depression I had been carrying for years had become something I could not manage anymore. I want to be honest here without going into details that are not necessary. I reached a point where I no longer wanted to be alive. I did not see a future for myself. I was not making plans or dreaming about what I wanted to be. I was just waiting to be old enough to not have to do this anymore. I attempted to end my life during my first year of high school. I survived. I am still here. And later, and this is something that is hard to even say out loud, my mother made a joke about it. She laughed because someone had said to her that people who fail at that are stupid. And she repeated it. And she laughed. I want you to sit with that for a moment, not because I want you to feel angry on my behalf, though I understand if you do, but because I want you to understand the environment I was living in. That was not a home. That was a place where I slept. I dropped out of school for a year during high school, not because I gave up on education, but because I could not continue in that state. I had to step away. I had to breathe. Eventually, I came back. I finished. I even earned awards along the way, awards I attended alone without telling my family because telling them always led to complications. My father, despite his own struggles and failures, had extremely high expectations for me specifically. Not for my younger siblings, for me, the firstborn, the one who was supposed to represent something. And so awards should have been celebrated, but instead they became another source of pressure, another thing to be controlled. I also ran away from home during this period. My family eventually found me. I stayed with an aunt for a time. Things kept shifting and moving and changing the way they always had for me. Instability was simply the water I swam in. I did not know what a different kind of life felt like. When I eventually started working as a call center agent, among other things, the pattern continued. Staying in one place for a long time felt foreign. My internal landscape was still chaotic even when the external situation looked more stable. There were days when I was commuting or just going about my routine, and my mind was somewhere else entirely, somewhere dark. I was not present. I was enduring. My father passed away in 2012. I was 24 years old. He was 48. And as painful as that loss was, what followed was in some ways even harder. With him gone, the full weight of the family's expectations fell even more heavily on me. I was not just the oldest child anymore. I was now expected to fill a role I had never been asked to want. And with my mother's personality the way it is, there was no room for me to grieve without it somehow also being my fault. Everything was always my fault. If I said something, it was wrong. If I said nothing, that was also wrong. If something bad happened that had nothing to do with me, it was still connected back to me in some way. That is what life with a narcissistic parent looks like. And if you have lived it, you already know. Explaining it to someone who is not is almost impossible. Because from the outside, it can look like normal family tension. From the inside, it is suffocating. I want to talk briefly about what moving around so much and living in that kind of environment actually does to a person, because I think this is the part that is most useful for people watching this. There is a reason I struggle with stability, even now. There is a reason that trusting people does not come naturally to me. There is a reason that my body still defaults to stress even when things are objectively calmer. When a child grows up in an unpredictable environment, moving schools, witnessing conflict, experiencing instability as the norm, their nervous system adapts to that. It learns to always be on guard. It learns that calm is temporary and that something bad is probably coming. Psychologists call this a trauma response. When it comes from years and years of repeated difficult experiences rather than one single event, it is often described as complex PTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder. The word complex is important here. It means the trauma was not one moment. It was a way of life. And that kind of trauma does not go away just because the situation changes. It lives in the body. It shapes your thoughts. It affects your health. In my case, I developed hypertension and blood sugar issues in my early 20s. My immune system became weak. My body had been in survival mode for so long that it started to show the cost of that. I am sharing all of this because this channel is called Jana Unfiltered, and I want that name to actually mean something. I am not here to perform a version of myself that is easier to watch. I am here because I believe that the things we are most ashamed of, the things we think make us too broken or too complicated or too much, those are exactly the things that someone else needs to hear. Because shame grows in silence. And I have been silent for long enough. I am still hiding from my family. I know that sounds extreme. In Filipino culture especially, that is not something people talk about openly. We are taught that family is sacred, that you endure, that you forgive, that you stay. And I tried that. I tried it for decades. But there is a point where staying stops being loyalty and starts being self-destruction. I reached that point, and I chose myself. For the first time in my life, I chose myself. I am not saying that is the right choice for everyone. Every situation is different. But I want anyone watching this who is in a genuinely unsafe environment, mentally, emotionally, or physically, to know that leaving is not betrayal. Protecting yourself is not selfishness. You are allowed to choose your own survival. This channel is part of my survival too. It is my outlet. It is the therapy I cannot afford to pay for. Sharing these things out loud, even imperfectly, even nervously, is part of how I am learning to process what happened to me and who I am because of it and despite it. And if something I say helps even one person feel less alone, then this is worth it. If you are going through something similar right now, if things feel impossible and the darkness feels permanent, please know that feelings, even the most overwhelming ones, can change. If you need to talk to someone, look for a crisis helpline in your country. In the Philippines, you can reach the National Center for Mental Health at 1553. You do not have to go through the hardest moments alone. I am Jana. This is my unfiltered story, and I am just getting started. Thanks for watching. If you found this helpful or relatable, please subscribe to join my journey toward 2,000 videos. On this channel, I share unfiltered ESL stories, yes, even the toxic ones, alongside Japanese and Korean language tips, my plants, my pets, and the reality of solo living. If you'd like to support my work and help me build my retirement fund, you can buy a treat for my pets via the link in the description below. Every bit of support helps keep this channel independent and growing. See you in the next one.